Good morning, Dan and Amy. New York Times story over the weekend that whipped the D.C. press corps into a lather. Spies and commandos warned months ago of Russian bounties on U.S. troops. The report is that U.S. intel officers and special ops forces in Afghanistan alerted their superiors as early as January to a suspected Russian plot to pay bounties to the Taliban. Russian plot to pay bounties to the Taliban to kill American troops in Afghanistan. And the reason this is a story that is being pushed is because the criticism here is that Trump didn't respond to this Russian effort. And, of course, the implicit insinuation is, because he's a pawn of Putin. They don't believe that they have disbanded their effort to advance the Russian collusion narrative in spite of the 3 years of abject failure and the failure to produce any evidence, with all of the evidence mounting on the other side of the case.
Yeah, and
so they'll continue to take opportunities that they can manufacture, like this one.
And President Trump, again, denied that he was briefed on any Russian plot to kill American soldiers. And even Putin said that this is not a joke.
Well, nobody can believe what Putin says, so he's irrelevant. But that is what the president said in response to the story. For more context to this story and a few others, we're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of Wiki at War, as well as Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you.
So what about this report about intel officers uncovering a plot by the Russians to pay the Taliban to kill American troops?
Yeah, right. And as you know, I don't have access to any classified information, so I just know what everybody else knows. So here's what we do know: has the GRU, the Russians, done despicable acts like this? We're actually killing people or putting out bounties on people killed. The answer is absolutely. Is there an enormous amount of disinformation going on in Afghanistan, including disinformation spread by the Russians, where you could actually have a disinformation campaign that says, hey, we're doing this, but they're not actually doing it, which is not out of the realm either. And I think the third thing, as you pointed out, is, we have seen this story so many times before. A newspaper goes and gets some version of something from somebody that's unnamed. They print that as if it's the absolute God-spoken truth. We immediately find out that, some of these things we know are factually incorrect, like the president being briefed on this. And yet we've, created a narrative that which everybody runs with, and I guess I'm just skeptical because this is kind of the president's phone call with, with the Ukrainians kind of deluxe, right? It's the same narrative once again. It follows the same pattern. I think we'll just see more of this running up to the election because this is just how these media outlets are operating.
Can you refresh our collective recollections of what the president has done vis-a-vis Russia in the last 3 years? Would you characterize him as being particularly soft on Russia, or has he been particularly aggressive with respect to Russia and their anti-American activities?
In his public diplomacy, the president has often kind of said, we should try to communicate with the Russians, which I would point out, by the way, is what every single European leader says. Every single one of them, including Macron, who right now is holding, organizing meeting with the Russians. Everybody says we should talk to the Russians, right? But behind the president's public diplomacy, which he does in spite of all the criticism that he gets, he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to try to be a diplomat. He could just ignore the Russians and give people one less thing to criticize. But he takes those shots because it's part of Americans' comprehensive approach to dealing with Russia. But on the other hand, we are dead set against Nord Stream 2, which is the number one energy project the Russians want in Europe. It is literally their golden ticket into Europe, and we've opposed that at every turn. We have strengthened NATO. We've got NATO to put another $100 billion into the defense of NATO, which the Russians hate. We have supported Russian sanctions from the Ukraine, which continue to this day. We have limited what the Russians have been able to accomplish in Syria. We have protested what the Russians are doing in Libya. We have harmed the Ukrainians, which is the one thing the Russians didn't want us to do. So we have supported Georgia, which is a country that's having issues with the Russians. So it's very, very difficult to find, in an operational perspective, one area where we have actually given it to the Russians.
So, do you think it's beyond the realm of possibility, though, that the Russians did plot to kill American soldiers, that they paid the Taliban? Because the mainstream media is saying, okay, well, you don't know, you deny that you were briefed on it, but what are you going to do about it now?
Well, does it make sense that the Russians would do that? I don't know. I don't actually know if it makes sense. What do the Russians actually gain by having Afghanistan become a quagmire? It's very clear that the American presence in Afghanistan is not going to result in kind of an American foothold. So Afghanistan's part of the Russian frontier. The Russians worry about that. But the notion of Afghanistan falling into the American orbit, that's not going to happen. On the other hand, chaos in Afghanistan really doesn't serve the Russians. It just gives them another problem to deal with, and they have problems already. So is it possible? Yeah, I mean, there might be some Russian motive there, but it's not an obvious thing that this is something that, well, of course the Russians would do this. So, look, I don't put anything past Putin. He's a thoroughly evil man. But, I am kind of with the president and the director of national intelligence and the intelligence community that says we should have good, solid intel on something before we act on it. But look, we know what the president will do. We absolutely know what the president will do. What did he do to Soleimani when the Iranians went after Americans?
Eliminated him.
Took him out.
Yeah.
This president, I believe in my heart of hearts, politics aside, I don't do politics. This president has always stood up for the men and women in uniform. And if somebody's coming after them, he's not going to stand for that. His track record on that is unimpeachable.
Speaking of the men and women in uniform in U.S. military, just as a quick COVID-19 aside, one of the things that we talk about during the pandemic is, you can't have a strong healthcare system if you don't have a strong economy. Well, you can't have a strong military for long if you don't have a strong economy either, or at least not unless you do the military to the exclusion of everything else like a despot would. And so are you concerned at all about our economic vitality, not just as a God-fearing American, but also vis-a-vis our ability to maintain the readiness of our military?
I am. I've said this a lot. We're in an age of great power competition. We have people out there that are trying to mess with us. I think the most important thing right now is to get the American economy up and running. It's not just important for the lives and livelihood of 330 million Americans. It's important for our ability to compete in the world. So, yeah, I think that getting the economy up and running is literally job one. And we all acknowledge that we have to do that in a way that is safe and deals with the public health challenges. But for defense as well as everything else, we can't build things, we can't recruit people, we can't train people, let alone everything else. So, yeah, getting the country up and running again, that is literally the most important national security concern in the world right now.
Yeah. What do you make of the fact that, the most patriotic day in our country, the 4th of July, it's been canceled? I mean, people can't even sit in their cars and watch a fireworks show. Do you find that strange?
Yeah.
I mean, and nobody cares. It's like everything's canceled. Oh, and no 4th of July.
Well, we've had tougher 4th of Julys in American history. So, people need to carry this day in their heart. And I think if we get to the point where you need fireworks and a picnic to celebrate the day, there's something wrong there. I mean, we should carry this day in our heart. That's the most important thing. You can do that wherever you are.
I heard some scuttlebutt, wanted to get your reaction to, about moving Pacific Fleet subs to the South China Sea, like a real move of more presence there. And I wondered if you had heard anything about that and if that indicates anything about escalating tensions between America and the Chinese. Well,
I think the competition in the South China Seas is definitely escalating. I think the one of the clearest examples of that we have seen is not just the United States, but other countries pushing back now. So I think I think everything's on the table. The thing about subs though is, geography matters. I mean, what the water looks like, the ability to operate there, what the utility of subs are. That's that's something that you really have to take into account. But yeah, there's no question that we're going to see a lot more focus on the South China Sea competition.
Just because of John Bolton's book that we spoke about a little bit last week, I wanted to get your sort of progress report 3 years in and 5 months from an election. John Bolton argues that America is less safe, that our national security is less robust because of President Trump's decisions. What would you say about President Trump in terms of the national security position America is in, our standing in the world?
Well, objectively, what I do is I look at the pacing threats. We already talked about Russia. Russia has really not had any significant strategic advances since Trump came into office. China's been challenged in a way that no president's done in the last 3 decades. So, I think that's unprecedented. Iran's in the worst shape it's ever been in. Its power and influence in the region has never been under more pressure. North Korea, regardless of the fact that the diplomatic talks aren't making much progress, is as checkmated as ever. So I think if you look at the pacing threats, in the world today, we're in a much better shape than we were 3 years ago. And that's not even, people forget, 4 years ago, the number one thing on everybody's concern was transnational Islamic terrorism and ISIS essentially having a caliphate the size of a country. And of course, that threat is incredibly diminished. So by any objective standard, I think the U.S. is in a stronger strategic position we are today, despite COVID, despite, elbowing with allies, despite, grumpy enemies, than we were 3 years ago. I think that's just objectively true.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, always appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature, changing the world one life at a time.
I started Balance of Nature, I think the beginning of this year, and I just had my 6-month follow-up on my blood work. Oh my gosh, when the doctor's office called me, they were so impressed with the changes in my levels. It's hard to get a doctor excited, but when my doctor saw the blood work, she was excited. So I got to credit the fruits and veggies, Balance of Nature, and considering what I've seen in the blood work, it's well worth the cost.
Experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself. Right now, Balance of Nature is offering free shipping and 35% off on any new preferred order. Call 800-2468-751. That's 800-2468-751. Or by going to balanceofnature.com and make sure to receive this special radio offer by using discount code CHICAGO.
Guys, prioritizing your health now is more important than ever, not only to build your immune system, but to address any chronic health issues you may have. I recommend my friends at Low T Center. They exclusively specialize in men's wellness and follow strict medical guidelines for your health and safety. They're one of the leading men's medical providers in the country. Low T Center has reinvented the doctor's visit, making it quick and easy to get all of your levels checked, not just your testosterone. It starts with an annual wellness exam where they do a comprehensive health assessment so you know all the numbers important to your health. If you've been feeling tired, grumpy, have noticed weight gain and loss of muscle mass, these could all be signs of low testosterone levels, low thyroid, or even sleep apnea. Low T Center can determine the cause and help. And now they offer monitored, self-inject, at-home testosterone treatments, providing convenience and additional health monitoring measures for your safety. This includes a take-home blood pressure monitoring cuff. At Low T Center, most health insurance is accepted. They'll check it out for you. So book your annual wellness exam or annual physical today. Go to lowtcenter.com. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare.
We started Untuck It to create the perfect untucked shirts, but we had other great ideas too.